Chapter 1. The Cursed Cabin. The SS Azure gleamed under the pale November sun, its white hull a beacon of luxury against Southampton's grey docks. Hercule Poirot, his moustache impeccably waxed, adjusted his Homburg hat and surveyed the bustling gangway. Passengers in furs and tailored suits streamed aboard, their voices a symphony of anticipation for the transatlantic voyage to New York. Poirot, ever observant, noted the gleam in their eyes, hope, perhaps, or secrets. "Mon Dieu," he murmured to himself, "a ship is but a microcosm of humanity, n'est-ce pas? All their little dramas confined within these steel walls." He presented his ticket to a steward, a young man with nervous eyes, who glanced at it and paled slightly. "Cabin 13, sir. First class, starboard side. I trust you'll find it comfortable." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "You hesitate, my friend. Is there something amiss with cabin 13? The steward flushed. No, sir. It's a fine cabin. Only, well, there's talk, nothing serious, mind you." "Talk?" Poirot's green eyes sparkled with curiosity. "I am Hercule Poirot. I do not dismiss talk. Speak, if you please." The steward lowered his voice. "They say cabin 13's cursed, sir. Last voyage, a gentleman in that cabin fell overboard. Year before, a lady took ill and didn't survive the crossing. Just superstition, of course." Poirot's lips twitched. "Superstition is the shadow of truth, mon ami. I shall keep my eyes open." He proceeded to the first-class deck, his polished shoes clicking on the polished teak. The SS Azure was a marvel. Art Deco chandeliers, mahogany panelling, and a grand staircase that rivaled the finest hotels. Yet, as Poirot reached cabin 13, he felt a chill, though the corridor was warm. The door, marked with a brass 13, seemed unremarkable, yet he sensed an air of disquiet. Inside, the cabin was opulent, a four-poster bed, a velvet-upholstered chaise, and a porthole framing the grey sea. Poirot unpacked methodically, his mind turning over the steward's words. A curse, he mused, is often a convenient mask for human misdeeds. That evening, Poirot dined in the Grand Saloon, where crystal clinked and laughter mingled with the hum of a string quartet. He observed his fellow passengers, his mind cataloguing details as a jeweller examines gems. At the captain's table sat Sir Reginald Hargrove, a British diplomat with a stiff moustache and evasive eyes, accompanied by his mousy governess, Miss Clara Wren, whose spectacles could not hide her sharp glances. Across from them was Madame Vivienne Dubois, a French actress whose laughter was as practised as her rouge, her young companion Pierre Laurent, hovering attentively. Colonel Mortimer Blake, retired from the Indian Army, sat ramrod straight, his weathered face betraying a distaste for the company. And then there was Miss Eleanor Vance, an American heiress with diamonds at her throat and a restless energy, her laughter cutting through the din. Poirot's attention lingered on Miss Vance, who occupied cabin 14, adjacent to his own. She spoke loudly of her plans in New York, but her eyes darted nervously, as if expecting an unseen threat. "I simply adore this ship," she declared to Sir Reginald, "though I hear some cabins have the histories." Sir Reginald coughed. "Nonsense, my dear. Ghost stories for gullible fools." "Perhaps," Miss Vance said, her smile tight, "but I shan't sleep easy next to cabin 13. Madame Dubois leaned forward, her voice a velvet purr. "Oh, chérie, you Americans love a thrill. Tell me, what do you fear? A ghost or something more? Earthly?" Miss Vance's laugh was brittle. "I fear nothing, madame, but I lock my door at night." Poirot sipped his wine, his mind alight. "Interessant," he whispered. The table's chatter continued, but he sensed undercurrents, glances exchanged, words unspoken. Miss Wren's hand trembled as she reached for her glass. Colonel Blake's jaw tightened when Miss Vance mentioned New York. Pierre Laurent's devotion to Madame Dubois seemed almost too fervent. As the evening drew to a close, Poirot strolled the deck, the sea air sharp against his face. The ship's horn sounded a mournful note as the SS Azure steamed into the Atlantic's embrace. He paused by a lifeboat, his thoughts on cabin 13. A curse, he said softly, or a stage for something far more sinister. He retired to his cabin, unaware that in a few short hours a scream would shatter the night, and the mystery of cabin 13 would begin in earnest. "Hey, detective, quick question. Where in the world are you solving mysteries from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you want more twisted tales, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's case, it gets even creepier." Stay sharp. Chapter 2. The Scream in the Night. The SS Azure cut through the Atlantic's inky waves, its lights casting fleeting reflections on the water. Hercule Poirot, nestled in the crisp linens of cabin 13, was roused from a light slumber by a sound that pierced the ship's gentle hum. A scream, sharp and desperate, from the cabin next door. He sat upright, his heart steady but his mind racing. "Mon Dieu, what is this?" he muttered, glancing at his pocket watch. 2:17 a.m. The scream had come from cabin 14, Miss Eleanor Vance's quarters. Poirot donned his silk dressing gown, slipped on his polished shoes, and stepped into the corridor. The passage was dim, lit only by sconces casting long shadows. A small crowd had already gathered. A steward, wide-eyed and clutching a ring of keys. Madame Vivienne Dubois, her face bare of makeup but no less striking. And Colonel Mortimer Blake, his nightshirt tucked hastily into trousers. Miss Clara Wren hovered at the edge, her spectacles glinting as she wrung her hands. "What in blazes is happening?" Colonel Blake barked, his voice hoarse from sleep. "That scream woke half the ship." "It came from Miss Vance's cabin," Madame Dubois said, her voice low but trembling. "We must see if she is hurt." The steward, the same nervous lad Poirot had met earlier, fumbled with his keys. "I'll open it, ma'am, but, oh heavens, I hope it's nothing serious." Poirot raised a hand. "Attendez, permit me, Hercule Poirot, to take charge." "We must proceed with order. Open the door, s'il vous plaît, but touch nothing." The steward nodded, his hands shaking as he unlocked cabin 14. The door swung open, revealing a scene that stilled the group's murmurs. Miss Eleanor Vance lay sprawled across her bed, her silk nightgown stained crimson. A dagger, its handle ornate with a pearl inlay, protruded from her chest. Her eyes, wide and lifeless, stared at the ceiling, and her right hand clutched a crumpled piece of paper. "Sacre bleu!" Poirot whispered, stepping forward. He knelt beside the body, his eyes scanning every detail. The porthole was shut, the latch secure. The cabin door, he noted, had been locked from the inside. The steward's key had been necessary to enter. A faint scent of lavender lingered, mingling with the metallic tang of blood. "She's dead?" Miss Wren's voice was barely a whisper, her face ashen. "Quite dead," Poirot confirmed, his tone grave. "A single thrust, precise and fatal. This was no accident." Colonel Blake clenched his fists. "Damned outrage! Who could do this on a ship like this?" Madame Dubois clutched her shawl, her eyes darting to the corridor. "And in the middle of the night, we are all in danger, non?" Poirot ignored their outbursts, his attention on the crumpled paper in Miss Vance's hand. With delicate precision, he pried it free, unfolding it to reveal a single line scrawled in hasty ink. "The curse of 13 claims another." He frowned, his moustache twitching. "Interessant. A message, perhaps a taunt, or a distraction." The steward, trembling, stammered. "The curse! Cabin 13's next door. I told you, sir, it's cursed." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "A curse does not wield a dagger, my friend. A human hand did this." He stood, addressing the group. "No one leaves this corridor. We must summon the captain and secure the scene. There is a murderer among us." As the steward hurried off, Poirot's gaze swept over the onlookers. Madame Dubois' composure seemed forced, her fingers twisting the edge of her shawl. Colonel Blake's outrage felt almost theatrical, his eyes avoiding the body. Miss Wren's trembling had ceased, replaced by an odd stillness, as if she were calculating something. Footsteps announced the arrival of Captain Harrow, a burly man with a weathered face and a commanding presence. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, nodding grimly. "I was told you'd taken cabin 13. Seems trouble follows you, or that cabin." "Trouble follows the wicked, Captain," Poirot replied, his voice calm. "I require your authority to question the passengers and examine this ship. We must act swiftly." Harrow nodded. "You have it, but keep it quiet, Poirot. Panic on a ship is worse than a storm." Poirot inclined his head, his mind already turning. The locked door, the cryptic note, the dagger's ornate handle, each was a piece of the puzzle. And cabin 13, his own quarters, loomed in his thoughts. Was its proximity coincidence, or was the curse a clever veil for a calculated crime? As the captain ordered the body covered and the corridor cleared, Poirot lingered, his grey cells humming. "Miss Vance feared something," he murmured, "and someone ensured she would fear no more." Chapter 3. The Locked Door Puzzle. The first light of dawn crept through the porthole of cabin 14, casting a pale glow over the grim scene. Hercule Poirot stood motionless, his eyes sweeping the room where Miss Eleanor Vance lay dead, the dagger still embedded in her chest. The ship's doctor, a wiry man named Doctor Langston, had confirmed death by a single stab wound to the heart inflicted hours earlier. Captain Harrow had sealed the corridor, and now Poirot, alone with the captain and a steward, began his meticulous examination. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, "a locked room, a dead woman, and a note that speaks of curses. It is a puzzle designed to tantalize." He circled the cabin, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. The door, he confirmed, had been locked from the inside, its bolt intact until the steward's key turned it. The porthole, too small for a man to pass through, was securely latched. No panels in the walls or ceiling suggested hidden passages. "A classic conundrum," Poirot said, his moustache twitching. "How does a killer enter, kill, and leave a locked room?" Captain Harrow rubbed his jaw. "Could she have done it herself? Locked the door, then?" He gestured vaguely at the dagger. Poirot shook his head. "Non, Captain. The angle of the wound, it is impossible for self-infliction. And this note," he held up the crumpled paper, its words stark. "The curse of 13 claims another. It is too theatrical for a suicide. No, we seek a murderer." He knelt beside the body, noting Miss Vance's rigid grip on the note, her fingers unadorned save for a faint indentation where a ring might have been. Her silk nightgown, though blooded, was otherwise undisturbed, and her face bore an expression of shock, not fear. "She did not expect this blow," Poirot mused. "It was swift, intimate, someone she trusted, perhaps." His gaze shifted to the dagger's pearl-inlaid handle, an elegant piece that seemed out of place in such a violent act. "This weapon," he said, "is not common. It is a thing of beauty, chosen with care. We must learn its origin." The steward, hovering nervously, spoke up. "Sir, I heard Miss Vance arguing with someone yesterday afternoon near the lounge. Couldn't catch the words, but she sounded upset." Poirot's eyes gleamed. Très bien. And who was this someone? The steward hesitated. I couldn't see, sir, but it was a man's voice, low and sharp. Poirot nodded, filing the detail away. He turned to a small writing desk by the porthole, where a few items lay scattered. A silver hairbrush, a vial of lavender perfume, and a half-burned cigarette in an ashtray. He sniffed the cigarette, noting its foreign brand, Turkish perhaps. Curious, he said. Miss Vance did not smoke at dinner. Did she entertain a visitor? Captain Harrow frowned. If someone was here, how'd they get out? The door was locked, and the porthole's no exit. Précisément, Poirot replied. That is the heart of our puzzle. But let us consider the note. It speaks of cabin 13, my own quarters. Is it a clue, a taunt, or a misdirection? He examined the desk further, finding a small drawer slightly ajar. Inside was a torn piece of paper, not unlike the note in Miss Vance's hand. It bore a single word, scrawled in the same hasty ink. Betrayed. Poirot held it up to the light, noting the paper's quality, expensive, like the ship's stationery. Interessant, he said. 2 notes, one clutched, one hidden. They tell a story, but of what? Betrayal, curses, a locked door. The pieces they do not yet fit. The captain shifted impatiently. Poirot, we need answers. The passengers are already whispering about that cursed cabin of yours. If word spreads— Patience, Captain, Poirot interrupted, his voice calm but firm. Hercule Poirot does not chase whispers. He seeks truth. I must speak with those who knew Miss Vance, her companions, her enemies. And I must know more of this dagger. As the steward covered the body with a sheet, Poirot stepped into the corridor, where a small crowd lingered despite the captain's orders. Madame Vivienne Dubois stood with Pierre Laurent, her young companion, whose face was pale but composed. Sir Reginald Hargrove and Miss Clara Wren whispered nearby, while Colonel Mortimer Blake paced, his boots heavy on the teak floor. Poirot addressed them, his voice clear. Mesdames et messieurs, a tragedy has occurred. Miss Vance is dead, murdered in her cabin. I, Hercule Poirot, will find the culprit, but I require your cooperation. Who saw Miss Vance last evening after dinner? Silence fell, broken only by the ship's distant hum. Madame Dubois spoke first, her tone measured. I saw her on the deck around 10. She seemed distracted, said she was retiring early. Colonel Blake grunted. I passed her in the corridor, near 11. She was alone, heading to her cabin. Miss Wren's voice was soft. I saw her, too, just before midnight. She was at her door, looking nervous. I thought she'd dropped something. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Dropped something? What, precisely? A ring, I think, Miss Wren said, flushing. It rolled. Toward your cabin, Monsieur Poirot. She picked it up quickly and went inside. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. A missing ring, a Turkish cigarette, a locked door, and 2 cryptic notes. The curse of cabin 13 loomed, but he suspected a more human hand at work. Merci, he said. We shall speak again, all of you. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze on cabin 13's door. The puzzle begins, he whispered, and Hercule Poirot shall solve it. Chapter 4. The Suspects Assemble. The grand saloon of the SS Azure shimmered under the glow of crystal chandeliers. Its opulent decor a stark contrast to the grim purpose of the gathering. Hercule Poirot stood at the head of the room, his small frame commanding attention as he faced the assembled passengers. The air was thick with unease, the murmur of the ship's engines underscoring whispered speculations about the murder in cabin 14. Captain Harrow flanked Poirot, his face stern, while a steward guarded the door. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and precise, a crime most heinous has occurred. Miss Eleanor Vance, a passenger of this fine vessel, was murdered last night in her locked cabin. I, Hercule Poirot, have been tasked with finding the culprit. Each of you, I regret to say, is a suspect until proven otherwise." A gasp rippled through the room. Poirot's green eyes scanned the faces before him, noting every reaction. Sir Reginald Hargrove, the British diplomat, sat rigidly, his fingers drumming on the table. Beside him, Miss Clara Wren, the governess, clutched a handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Madame Vivienne Dubois, the French actress, leaned back with a practised air of nonchalance, while her companion, Pierre Laurent, hovered protectively. Colonel Mortimer Blake glowered, his weathered hands clenched. Two others joined the group. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, a reserved botanist travelling to New York for a lecture, and Mr. Thomas Carver, a brash American businessman with a loud tie and louder voice. Sir Reginald spoke first, his tone clipped. "This is outrageous, Poirot. I'm a diplomat, not a common criminal. I demand to know why we're being treated like suspects." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Monsieur, a locked door does not discriminate by title. Miss Vance was seen arguing with a man yesterday, and you, Sir Reginald, were in her company at dinner. What was the nature of your conversation?" Sir Reginald flushed. "We discussed trade policies, nothing more. She was an American, you know, interested in tariffs." "Vraiment?" Poirot's tone was polite but sceptical, and yet she seemed agitated, no? Perhaps tariffs are more passionate than I realized. Madame Dubois laughed, a silvery sound that drew eyes. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, Eleanor was always dramatic. She spoke to me of a scandal in New York. A lover, perhaps? She hinted at secrets but shared none." Poirot turned to her, his gaze piercing. "Secrets, madam?" "And did you see her after dinner, when she retired to her cabin?" "Hélas, no," Madame Dubois replied, fanning herself. "I was in the lounge with Pierre, enjoying the quartet." Pierre nodded eagerly, his dark eyes fixed on her. Colonel Blake snorted. "This is a waste of time. The girl was foolish, flaunting her wealth. Probably crossed some thug in Southampton. Check the crew, Poirot, not us." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "A thug, Colonel, who locks a door after stabbing his victim? Non, this was no impulsive act. You passed Miss Vance near 11, you said. Did you see anyone else?" The Colonel hesitated, then muttered, "No one." The corridor was empty. Miss Wren's voice, soft but clear, broke the tension. I saw someone. Not clearly, but a figure near cabin 13 just before midnight. They moved quickly into the shadows." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Très intéressant, mademoiselle. A figure near my own cabin, perhaps watching Miss Vance, man or woman?" "I couldn't tell," Miss Wren admitted, her cheeks paling. "It was too dark." Dr. Marsh, who had been silent, spoke up, her voice calm but firm. "This talk of curses and shadows is nonsense. Miss Vance was nervous at dinner, yes, but she mentioned no threats. Perhaps she knew her killer, a personal matter." Mr. Carver, the businessman, slammed his fist on the table. "Personal or not, this is bad for business. I paid for a luxury crossing, not a murder mystery. Solve it quick, Poirot, or I'll cable my lawyer in New York." Poirot smiled thinly. "Monsieur Carver, your lawyer cannot unlock a door that was locked from within. But Hercule Poirot can unlock the truth. Tell me, did you know Miss Vance?" Carver shrugged. "Met her once in Chicago. She was mixed up with some shady investors. Didn't trust her type. Too much money, too little sense." Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing each response. Sir Reginald's evasion, Madame Dubois' vague hints, The Colonel's defensiveness, Miss Wren's observation, Dr. Marsh's rationality, Carver's bluster, each was a thread in the tapestry of deception. And the note, "The curse of 13 claims another," lingered in his thoughts. Was it a clue to the killer's motive, or a clever ruse? He addressed the group again. "I require your movements last night, from 10 o'clock onward. Write them down, s'il vous plaît, and give them to the steward. And if any of you recall anything, however small, about Miss Vance or cabin 13, you will tell me at once." As the passengers murmured and reached for the provided paper, Poirot caught a glance between Pierre Laurent and Madame Dubois, swift but laden with meaning. Miss Wren's hands trembled as she wrote, and Sir Reginald's pen hesitated, as if weighing what to reveal. Captain Harrow leaned close to Poirot. "You think one of them did it?" Poirot's voice was low. "Captain, in a locked room, the truth hides in plain sight. But first, I must know more of Miss Vance's life and her enemies." As the group dispersed, Poirot's grey cells hummed. The dagger, the note, the missing ring, and now a shadowy figure near cabin 13. The puzzle was growing, and Hercule Poirot relished its challenge. Chapter 5. Shadows of the Past. The SS Azure steamed through a restless sea, its decks swaying gently under a sky heavy with clouds. Hercule Poirot sat in the ship's library, a haven of leather-bound books and polished oak, reviewing the passengers' written accounts of their strikeout, their movements on the night of Miss Eleanor Vance's murder. The statements were predictably vague, alibis of card games, late-night strolls, or solitary reading, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of Miss Vance's life. He had requested the ship's purser to provide any records on Miss Vance, and a cable from his contacts in London had arrived that morning, detailing her past. Eleanor Vance, heiress to a Chicago steel fortune, was no stranger to scandal. 5 years prior, in 1929, she had been embroiled in a high-society affair in New York, a broken engagement, whispers of blackmail, and a mysterious disappearance of a family heirloom, a sapphire ring. The details were murky, but the scandal had followed her like a shadow. Poirot's fingers tapped his moustache as he considered this. "A ring," he murmured, recalling Miss Wren's account of Eleanor retrieving a dropped ring near cabin 13. "And a scandal that may have enemies still lurking." He invited the suspects to the library one by one, beginning with Madame Vivienne Dubois. The actress swept in, her silk dress rustling, and settled into a chair with theatrical grace. "Monsieur Poirot," she purred, "I hope this won't take long. I have a rehearsal for the ship's talent night." Poirot's smile was polite but firm. "Madame, murder takes precedence over chansons. You spoke of Miss Vance's secrets. Tell me of this New York scandal you mentioned." Madame Dubois' eyes flickered, but her voice remained smooth. "It was the talk of Manhattan 5 years ago. Eleanor was engaged to a banker, Charles Whitmore. There were rumors she'd stolen a sapphire ring from his family, worth a fortune. She denied it, of course, but then the engagement ended abruptly, and she left for Europe. Some said she'd been paid to disappear." "Paid by whom?" Poirot pressed, his green eyes sharp. She shrugged. "The Whitmore family, perhaps. Or another suitor. Eleanor had many admirers and enemies." Next came Sir Reginald Hargrove, his diplomatic composure fraying. "I barely knew her," he insisted, but Poirot noted the sweat beading on his brow. "We met at a few functions in London. She was ambitious, always seeking influential friends." "And you, a diplomat, were such a friend?" Poirot asked. "Did she ever mention a ring? Or this Whitmore scandal? Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. She alluded to past mistakes, but gave no details. I found her indiscreet. Colonel Mortimer Blake was less guarded, his voice gruff. Met her in 29 at a New York gala. She was charming but reckless. Heard she'd crossed Whitmore. Bad business. He's not a man to forgive. Poirot raised an eyebrow. You knew this Whitmore? Met him once, the colonel said. Cold fish. His family's powerful. Banking, politics. If Eleanor kept that ring, she'd have made a dangerous enemy. Miss Clara Wren entered next, her hands twisting nervously. I only knew Miss Vance from this voyage, she said softly. But I overheard her once, in the lounge, speaking of a ring. She said, it's my insurance, but it's a curse too. I thought it odd. Poirot's mind sparked. Insurance? A curious choice of words. Did she say more? Miss Wren shook her head. She saw me and stopped talking. She was speaking to Mr. Carver. Thomas Carver, the brash American, swaggered in last. Yeah, I knew Eleanor in Chicago, he admitted. She was mixed up with Whitmore's crowd. Word was, she kept that sapphire ring as leverage. Blackmail, maybe. Dangerous game. Poirot leaned forward. And you, Monsieur Carver? Did you have business with her? Carver's eyes narrowed. We talked investments once. She tried to pull me into some scheme, but I didn't bite. She wasn't trustworthy. As the interviews ended, Poirot excused himself to examine cabin 14 again. There, beneath the writing desk, he found a new clue. A torn photograph, half burned in the ashtray, alongside the Turkish cigarette. The image showed a younger Eleanor Vance, radiant, beside a man whose face was scorched away. On the back, in faded ink, were the initials CW and the year 1929. Mon Dieu, Poirot whispered, his grey cells humming. Charles Whitmore, perhaps. The ring, the scandal, the note about betrayal, they are linked. He recalled the note in Eleanor's hand. The curse of 13 claims another. Was the ring the key to her death, hidden somewhere on this ship? He stepped into the corridor, glancing at cabin 13's door. The scandal of 1929 was no mere gossip. It was a motive, and one of these passengers, he suspected, had carried its grudge across the Atlantic. Chapter 6. The Alibi Game. The SS Azure rocked gently on the Atlantic swells, but the atmosphere in the ship's smoking lounge was anything but calm. Hercule Poirot had gathered the suspects once more, this time under the guise of a casual conversation, though his green eyes missed nothing. The passengers' written alibis lay spread before him on a mahogany table, each a carefully crafted defence, or perhaps a lie. Poirot, his moustache impeccably waxed, leaned back in his chair, his demeanour deceptively relaxed. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice soft yet commanding, the truth, it is like a diamond, flawless under scrutiny, but easily hidden by a clever hand. Your alibis for the night of Miss Eleanor Vance's murder, they are incessant. Let us play a little game, we? The game of truth. Sir Reginald Hargrove bristled, his diplomatic poise strained. This is no game, Poirot. I was in my cabin by 10 reading dispatches. My steward can confirm I rang for tea at 12:30. Poirot nodded, his smile polite but probing. Vraiment, Sir Reginald. Yet the steward recalls delivering tea at 11, not 10:30. A small discrepancy, but time, it is the skeleton key to a locked room. Sir Reginald's face reddened, but he said nothing. Poirot turned to Madame Vivienne Dubois, whose scarlet lips curved in a defiant smile. And you, madame? You claim you were in the lounge with Monsieur Laurent until midnight. Yet a passenger saw you alone on the deck at 11:15 near cabin 14. Madame Dubois' fan paused mid-flutter. A mistake, Monsieur Poirot. I may have stepped out for air, but Pierre was with me. Weren't you, chérie? Pierre Laurent nodded vigorously, his dark curls bobbing. Yes, we were together. The lounge, then the deck, then bed. His voice was earnest, but his eyes flicked to Madame Dubois, seeking approval. Poirot's gaze lingered on Pierre. Curieux, Monsieur Laurent. The deck steward saw only Madame Dubois, not you. And your cabin is on the port side, far from cabin 14. Why were you in that corridor? Pierre's flush deepened. I was lost. This ship, it's a maze. Colonel Mortimer Blake snorted. His weathered face creased with disdain. Lost, boy, or sneaking about. I was in the card room till 11, then my cabin. Ask anyone. 4 chaps saw me there. Oui, Colonel, Poirot said, but the card game ended at 10:45, not 11. You were seen near cabin 13 shortly after. Care to explain? The Colonel's jaw tightened. I took a walk, needed air, didn't see Vance or anyone else. Miss Clara Wren, silent until now, spoke softly, her spectacles glinting. I was in my cabin by 10, Monsieur Poirot. I heard nothing until the scream, I swear it. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. Mademoiselle Wren, you mentioned a figure near cabin 13. Yet your cabin is 2 decks below. Why were you in that corridor at midnight? Miss Wren's hands trembled. I couldn't sleep. I was walking, that's all. I saw the figure, then returned to my cabin. Dr. Evelyn Marsh, the botanist, folded her arms. This is tedious, Poirot. I was in the library until 11, reading. The purser saw me leave. I had no reason to harm Miss Vance. And you, Monsieur Carver? Poirot turned to the American businessman, whose loud tie clashed with the lounge's elegance. You claim you were in the bar until midnight, yet the bartender recalls you leaving at 10:30. Carver shrugged, his grin cocky. So I had one too many and lost track of time. I was in my cabin after that, alone. Poirot's fingers tapped the table. Mon Dieu, so many solitary cabins, yet a woman is murdered in a locked room. Let us consider another matter. He produced the torn photograph from the ashtray, its scorched edge revealing Eleanor Vance beside the mysterious C.W. This was found in Miss Vance's cabin. Does anyone recognize the man? A tense silence followed. Madame Dubois' eyes narrowed, and Pierre shifted uncomfortably. Sir Reginald cleared his throat. Looks like Charles Whitmore, he said grudgingly. Met him in New York, 29, Eleanor's old fiancé. Poirot's gaze sharpened. And you, Madame Dubois, you knew of this scandal. Did you know Whitmore? She hesitated, then nodded. I met him once, at a gala. He was intense. Eleanor broke his heart, they said, and his family's pride. Pierre's voice was sharp. Why does it matter? Whitmore's not on this ship. Précisément, Poirot said, but his shadow is. And this ring Miss Vance mentioned, her insurance, it connects to him, no? He paused, noting Pierre's sudden pallor. Monsieur Laurent, you seem distressed. Pierre's hands clenched. I knew Eleanor, a little, in Paris last year. She spoke of a ring, said it was her safety net. I thought she was joking. Madame Dubois' eyes flashed. Pierre, you never told me this. The room stilled, the air thick with unspoken truths. Poirot's smile was serene, but his mind raced. Pierre's connection to Eleanor, however slight, was a crack in the facade. Was it romantic, or something darker? And why had Madame Dubois reacted with such vehemence? Merci, all of you, Poirot said, rising. Your alibis, they are like a house of cards, fragile, and one false move brings them down. I shall speak with you again." As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his gaze on Pierre and Madame Dubois, who whispered heatedly. The ring, the scandal, the photograph, and now a hidden relationship. Each was a thread in the tapestry of murder. And Cabin 13, with its cursed reputation, seemed to whisper its own secrets. Chapter 7. The Captain's Warning. The SS Azure groaned under the weight of an approaching storm, its decks tilting as dark clouds gathered on the horizon. Hercule Poirot stood in the captain's private office, a compact room lined with nautical charts and polished brass. Captain Harrow paced, his weathered face etched with worry, while the wind howled outside, rattling the portholes. "Monsieur Poirot," Harrow said, his voice low but urgent, "this murder is a powder keg. Passengers are whispering about Cabin 13's curse, and now the crew's spooked. If we don't have answers soon, we'll have panic on our hands, worse than a storm." Poirot's green eyes gleamed, unperturbed. "Mon ami, panic is born of ignorance, and Hercule Poirot brings light to darkness. But I concur. Time is our adversary. The storm, it isolates us, no? No wireless contact, no outside aid." Harrow nodded grimly. "The storm's cut us off for at least 2 days. No messages to shore, no chance of docking early. You've got to find this killer before things spiral." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his moustache twitching. "D'accord, the killer is aboard, and the clues, they multiply. The dagger, the notes, the photograph, the ring, all point to a motive rooted in Miss Vance's past. I must know more of her connections to our suspects." Harrow stopped pacing. "You think it's one of them? That lot you questioned?" "Précisément," Poirot replied. "Each has a thread tying them to Eleanor Vance, some stronger than others. Pierre Laurent's revelation of knowing her in Paris, it is très intéressant. And Madame Dubois's reaction, it was not mere surprise." Harrow frowned. "What about that ring? You keep mentioning it." Poirot's voice softened. "The ring, Captain, is the heart of this mystery. Miss Vance called it her insurance, tied to a scandal with Charles Whitmore. If it is aboard, it may be the key to her death, and the killer's motive." The captain sighed, rubbing his temples. "Do what you must, Poirot, but keep it discreet. I've ordered extra stewards to patrol the corridors, and Cabin 14 is sealed. Anything else you need?" "Oui," Poirot said. "Access to the ship's passenger manifest, and any correspondence Miss Vance sent or received. And I must speak again with the suspects, particularly young Monsieur Laurent." Harrow nodded, scribbling a note for the purser. As Poirot turned to leave, a steward burst in, breathless. "Sir, Captain, there's trouble in the lounge. Mr. Carver's shouting about the curse, stirring up the passengers." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Mon Dieu, the American's bluster becomes a nuisance. I shall handle this, Captain." In the first-class lounge, Thomas Carver stood on a chair, his face red as he addressed a small crowd of anxious passengers. "This ship's cursed, I tell you. Cabin 13's to blame, and now we're all trapped with a killer." Poirot stepped forward, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "Monsieur Carver, your theatrics serve no one. The curse of Cabin 13 is a tale for children. A human hand killed Miss Vance, and I, Hercule Poirot, will find it." Carver sneered but stepped down, muttering. The crowd dispersed, though their whispers lingered. Poirot caught sight of Pierre Laurent in a corner, his face pale, avoiding Madame Dubois, who stood nearby, her expression icy. Approaching Pierre, Poirot spoke softly. "Monsieur Laurent, a word. You knew Miss Vance in Paris, you said. Tell me more of this friendship." Pierre's eyes darted nervously. "It was nothing, Monsieur Poirot. We met at a cafe last spring. She was charming, spoke of her travels. She mentioned a ring once, said it was her protection against enemies. I thought she was being dramatic." "And these enemies?" Poirot pressed. "Did she name them?" Pierre hesitated, glancing at Madame Dubois, who was now watching them. She mentioned a man from her past, someone powerful. I didn't ask more. She seemed afraid." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. "Merci, monsieur. And Madame Dubois, did she know of your acquaintance with Miss Vance?" Pierre's voice dropped to a whisper. "Number Y never told Vivienne. She gets jealous." As Pierre hurried away, Poirot turned to find Miss Clara Wren hovering nearby, her spectacles reflecting the lounge's dim light. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice trembling, "I remembered something. Last night, before the scream, I saw a steward near cabin 14 carrying a tray. He seemed out of place." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "A steward, mademoiselle? Describe him." "Tall, dark hair, a scar on his cheek," she said. "I didn't recognize him." "Très bien," Poirot said, filing the detail away. A storm outside, a killer within, and now a mysterious steward. The threads of the mystery were tightening, and Poirot sensed the killer's confidence growing, but so too was his own resolve. As he left the lounge, the ship lurched, a reminder of the storm's approach. "The game accelerates," he murmured, "and Hercule Poirot shall not be outplayed." Chapter 8. A Second Tragedy. The SS Azure shuddered under the fury of the Atlantic storm, its chandeliers swaying as rain lashed the portholes. Hercule Poirot stood in the first-class dining saloon, where the passengers had gathered for luncheon, their faces pale with the dual strain of seasickness and fear. The news of Miss Eleanor Vance's murder had spread, despite Captain Harrow's efforts, and whispers of Cabin 13's curse hung heavy in the air. Poirot, his demeanour calm but his grey cells alert, observed the suspects at their table. Sir Reginald Hargrove picked at his food, his eyes darting to the door. Madame Vivienne Dubois, her makeup impeccable despite the hour, whispered to Pierre Laurent, whose hands trembled as he sipped his wine. Colonel Mortimer Blake sat stiffly, glaring at his plate, while Miss Clara Wren's spectacles glinted as she scanned the room. Dr. Evelyn Marsh and Thomas Carver were absent, the former claiming illness and the latter reportedly in the bar. As the steward served coffee, a piercing cry shattered the tense quiet. Dr. Marsh stumbled into the saloon, her face ashen, clutching the doorframe. "Help!" she gasped. "It's Mr. Carver. He's dead." Poirot was on his feet in an instant, his voice sharp. "Ooh, where is he, mademoiselle?" "In the bar," Dr. Marsh stammered. "I went to check on him. He wasn't at lunch. He's collapsed, frothing at the mouth." The saloon erupted in murmurs as Poirot, followed by Captain Harrow and Dr. Langston, the ship's doctor, hurried to the bar. There, sprawled across a leather banquette, lay Thomas Carver, his loud tie askew and his face contorted in a rictus of pain. A glass of whisky lay shattered on the floor, its contents pooling with an acrid scent. Dr. Langston knelt, examining the body. "Poison," he said grimly. "Cyanide, by the smell. He's been dead less than an hour." Poirot's eyes narrowed, taking in the scene. The bar was nearly empty, save for a lone steward cleaning glasses at the far end. A half-smoked Turkish cigarette, like the one found in Miss Vance's cabin, lay in an ashtray nearby. Poirot's gaze lingered on it, then shifted to a small, overturned bottle on the table. Unlabeled, its contents gone. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured. "Another death, and so soon. This killer grows bold." Captain Harrow's face was thunderous. Poirot! This is madness. 2 murders in 2 days. We're trapped in this storm, and the passengers will riot if this continues." Poirot raised a hand, his voice steady. "Calm, Captain. Panic is the killer's ally. We must act with precision." He turned to Dr. Marsh, who stood trembling. "Mademoiselle, you said Mr. Carver claimed knowledge of Miss Vance's affairs in Chicago. Did he share anything with you before his death?" Dr. Marsh nodded, her voice shaky. He was drunk, ranting about Eleanor's blackmail scheme. He said she had something on someone powerful. A ring. He kept mentioning a ring. He said he knew who she'd crossed, but then he started choking and collapsed. Poirot's moustache twitched. "Interessant. And you saw no one else here?" "No," she said. "Just the steward, over there, when I arrived." Poirot approached the steward, a tall man with a scar on his cheek, matching Miss Wren's description from the night of the first murder. "Monsieur, you served Mr. Carver his drink?" The steward nodded nervously. "Yes, sir. Just whiskey, like he asked. I didn't see nothing odd." "Vraiment?" Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. "And this bottle?" He pointed to the overturned vial. "Never saw it before," the steward said, his scar twitching. "He must have brought it himself." Poirot dismissed him for now, his mind racing. He gathered the suspects back in the saloon, their faces a mix of shock and suspicion. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "Mr. Carver is dead, poisoned. He claimed knowledge of Miss Vance's secrets, and now he is silenced. One of you, I fear, is desperate to keep those secrets buried." Madame Dubois' voice was sharp. "This is absurd, Poirot. Are we to be accused every time someone dies?" Colonel Blake slammed his fist on the table. "Carver was a loudmouth. Probably drank something he shouldn't have. Check the crew, Poirot." Miss Wren's voice was barely audible. He mentioned a ring to me too, yesterday. Said it was worth killing for." Poirot's gaze locked on her. "Précisément, mademoiselle. The ring, the scandal, the curse of Cabin 13, these are no coincidences. Someone aboard this ship fears exposure." As the passengers exchanged uneasy glances, Poirot noted Pierre Laurent's pallor and Madame Dubois' clenched jaw. The storm roared outside, but within, a deadlier tempest brewed. The killer had struck again, and Poirot knew the next move must be his. Chapter 9. The Psychology of Deception. The SS Azure's grand ballroom glowed with the warmth of candlelight, its Art Deco chandeliers casting patterns across the polished floor. Despite the storm raging outside, the ship's crew had organized a gala to lift the passengers' spirits, or, as Hercule Poirot suspected, to distract them from the shadow of 2 murders. The band played a lively waltz, and elegantly dressed guests moved through the room, their laughter brittle with unease. Poirot, impeccable in his black tie, stood near a marble pillar, his green eyes scanning the crowd. "Mon Dieu," he murmured to himself, "the human heart, it betrays itself in the smallest gestures. Tonight, I shall coax the truth from these shadows." He had devised a subtle trap, a psychological gambit to unsettle the killer. Earlier, he had instructed Captain Harrow to spread a rumor among the crew, knowing it would reach the passengers. Poirot had found a new clue in cabin 14. A hidden compartment containing evidence that would soon identify the murderer. The compartment was fictitious, but the reactions it provoked would be real. As the gala unfolded, Poirot mingled, his demeanor charming, but his observations relentless. Sir Reginald Hargrove, nursing a brandy, stood near the bar, his eyes flickering toward the exit whenever Poirot approached. "Sir Reginald, Poirot said, bowing slightly. "You seem distracted. The music, it does not please you?" Hargrove forced a smile. "Just tired, Poirot. All this talk of clues and compartments, it's unsettling." "Vraiment?" Poirot's tone was light. "A hidden compartment. It could hold many secrets, no? Perhaps a ring or a letter." Hargrove's glass trembled, but he said nothing, turning to converse with the steward. Poirot moved on, approaching Madame Vivienne Dubois, who was dazzling in an emerald gown, her arm linked with Pierre Laurent's. "Madame," Poirot said, "you dance with such grace, yet your eyes they search the room. For what, I wonder?" She laughed a practised trill. "Only for amusement, Monsieur Poirot. This talk of a hidden compartment, surely it's a jest to frighten us." Pierre's grip on her arm tightened, his voice sharp. "It's nonsense. There's no such compartment in cabin 14. You're playing games, Poirot." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Games, Monsieur Laurent. The game is murder, and the stakes are high. Tell me, did Miss Vance ever speak of hiding something precious?" Pierre paled, his eyes darting to Madame Dubois. "No, she never said anything like that." Madame Dubois' smile faltered, and she quickly led Pierre to the dance floor. Poirot noted their whispered exchange, tense and urgent. He turned to Colonel Mortimer Blake, who stood alone, his military bearing rigid. "Colonel," Poirot said, "you seem unmoved by this gala. Does the rumour of a new clue not intrigue you?" Blake snorted. "Clues, compartments, poppycock. I've seen real danger, Poirot. This is just shipboard gossip." "Peut-être," Poirot replied, "but gossip often hides truth. You knew Miss Vance in New York, and Mr. Carver too. Did they share enemies, perhaps?" Blake's jaw clenched. Carver was a braggart, Vance a schemer. If they had enemies, they made them themselves, and... Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Miss Clara Wren, who hovered near a buffet table, her spectacles catching the light. He approached, his voice gentle. "Mademoiselle Wren, you observe much but say little. The rumour of a hidden compartment, does it stir any memory?" Miss Wren's hands twisted her napkin. I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. But last night, before Mr. Carver died, he said something odd. He mentioned a safe place where secrets were kept. I thought he meant his cabin." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Très intéressant. And this steward with the scar, have you seen him tonight?" She hesitated, then pointed discreetly. "There, by the bar. He's serving drinks." Poirot followed her gaze, spotting the tall steward with a scar on his cheek, his movements brisk but nervous. Before Poirot could approach, Dr. Evelyn Marsh joined them, her face composed but her eyes wary. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, "this rumour of a compartment is causing a stir. Is it true?" Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Truth, Mademoiselle Marsh, is like a waltz. It reveals itself in steps. Did Mr. Carver ever mention a hiding place to you?" She shook her head. "He only ranted about Miss Vance's ring, said it was her downfall." As the band struck up a new tune, Poirot stepped back, his mind cataloguing each reaction. Sir Reginald's unease, Pierre's defensiveness, Madame Dubois's strained composure, Blake's dismissal, Wren's nervous precision, and Marsh's guarded calm. All were pieces of the puzzle. The steward with the scar, too, warranted scrutiny. The trap had worked, stirring the guilty, and Poirot sensed the killer's mask slipping. The storm outside roared, but within the ballroom, Poirot's grey cells danced. "The net tightens," he whispered, "and soon the truth shall step into the light." Chapter 10. The missing key. The storm had abated, leaving the SS Azure cloaked in an eerie calm. its decks slick with rain, as the Atlantic stretched endlessly around it. Hercule Poirot sat in his cabin, cabin 13, surrounded by notes and the passenger manifest, his grey cells working tirelessly to unravel the murders of Miss Eleanor Vance and Thomas Carver. The ship's isolation, cut off by the storm, heightened the urgency, and Poirot sensed the killer's desperation growing. He had spent the morning re-examining cabin 14, where Miss Vance had been found stabbed in a locked room. The locked door, the cryptic note, the Turkish cigarette, the torn photograph, and the missing ring all pointed to a calculated crime. But one detail gnawed at him: the mechanics of the locked door. How had the killer escaped a room bolted from within? Poirot's attention turned to the steward's master key, which had unlocked cabin 14 after the scream. He summoned the head steward, a grizzled man named Mr. Ferris, to the ship's office. "Monsieur Ferris," Poirot began, his voice precise, "the key to cabin 14. Where is it now?" Ferris frowned, checking his log. "It should be with Miss Vance's effects, sir. We found it in her cabin, on the bedside table, after we opened the door with the master key." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Vraiment! Show me." Ferris led him to a locked safe in the purser's office, where passengers' valuables were stored. He retrieved a small envelope labelled Vance Eleanor, cabin 14. Inside were her diamond earrings, a passport, and a few pound notes, but no key. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his moustache twitching. "The key is missing. This is no oversight, no. It is a clue." Ferris paled. "Missing, sir. But I saw it myself that night, right there on the table." "Précisément," Poirot said. "Someone took it after the murder, perhaps to hide their method. Tell me, who had access to this safe?" "Only me and the purser, sir," Ferris replied. "And the captain, of course. But the safe has been locked since we stored her things." Poirot nodded, dismissing Ferris with a wave. He returned to cabin 14, his mind reconstructing the timeline. The scream at 2:17 a.m., the locked door, the key on the table, yet now it was gone. He examined the lock, a sturdy brass mechanism, and noted faint scratches around the keyhole, barely visible. "Interessant," he said, "not forced, but tampered with, perhaps." He recalled Miss Wren's account of a steward with a scar near cabin 14, and the same man's presence in the bar when Carver was poisoned. Poirot sought him out, finding him polishing silver in the galley. The steward, introduced as James Kerr, stiffened as Poirot approached. "Monsieur Kerr," Poirot said, his tone genial but piercing. "You were near cabin 14 the night of Miss Vance's murder, and in the bar when Monsieur Carver died. You carry a scar, oui? Tell me, what did you see?" Kerr's hand touched his cheek, his eyes wary. "I was just doing my rounds, sir. Didn't see nothing unusual. As for the bar, I served Mr. Carver his whiskey, like I told you. And this." Poirot produced the Turkish cigarette from the bar's ashtray, matching the one found in Miss Vance's cabin. "You smoke this brand, no?" Kerr's face tightened. "Hi, sometimes. Plenty do, though. They're common enough." "Perhaps," Poirot said, pocketing the cigarette. "But coincidences, they pile like stones. And the key to cabin 14, have you seen it since that night?" "No, sir," Kerr said quickly, too quickly. "I don't touch passengers' things." Poirot dismissed him, his mind racing. The missing key suggested the killer had re-entered cabin 14 after the initial discovery to remove it, ensuring the locked room puzzle remained unsolved. But why? To protect the method, or to hide another clue? He gathered Captain and the remaining suspects: Sir Reginald Hargrove, Madame Vivienne Dubois, Pierre Laurent, Colonel Mortimer Blake, Miss Clara Wren, and Dr. Evelyn Marsh, in the library for a brief update. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said, "a new clue has emerged. The key to Miss Vance's cabin is missing. One of you knows why. I urge you to speak now, before the net tightens further." Sir Reginald's voice was sharp. "This is preposterous, Poirot. I was nowhere near her cabin after the murder." Madame Dubois' eyes flashed. "Nor I. You waste our time with this talk of keys." Pierre Laurent, pale and fidgeting, said nothing, but his gaze flicked to the floor. Colonel Blake muttered, "Check the crew, Poirot. They've got access to everything." Miss Wren adjusted her spectacles. I saw that steward Kerr near the purser's office yesterday. He seemed in a hurry." Dr. Marsh folded her arms. "This is getting us nowhere. The key could have been misplaced in the chaos." Poirot smiled thinly. "No, mademoiselle. The chaos is the killer's canvas. The key was taken deliberately, just as the ring remains hidden." He paused, noting Pierre's trembling hands and Madame Dubois' clenched jaw. The timeline narrows, and with it, the list of those who could have acted. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his grey cells humming. The missing key, the scratched lock, the Turkish cigarettes, and Kerr's presence at both crime scenes pointed to a pattern. The killer was close, and Poirot's trap was closing. "The puzzle takes shape," he whispered, "and Hercule Poirot shall not be outwitted." Chapter 11. The Confession. The SS Azure sailed through a sea now calm, the storm's fury replaced by an oppressive stillness that mirrored the tension among its passengers. Hercule Poirot stood in the ship's library, the air heavy with the scent of old leather and wax polish, as he prepared to confront the suspects once more. The missing key to cabin 14, the Turkish cigarettes, the torn photograph, and the elusive sapphire ring had tightened the web of clues, but the killer remained elusive. Poirot, his moustache impeccably waxed, knew the time had come to press harder. He had requested a private meeting with the key suspects: Sir Reginald Hargrove, Madame Vivienne Dubois, Pierre Laurent, Colonel Mortimer Blake, Miss Clara Wren, and Dr. Evelyn Marsh, along with the steward James Kerr, whose scarred cheek and nervous demeanour marked him as a person of interest. Captain Harrow stood by, his face grim, as the group assembled, their eyes wary and defensive. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice a velvet blade, "two murders stain this ship. Miss Eleanor Vance, stabbed in a locked cabin, and Monsieur Thomas Carver, poisoned in the bar. The key to cabin 14 is missing, and I believe one of you knows where it lies. The truth, it cannot hide forever. Speak now, or the consequences will be severe." A heavy silence followed, broken by Pierre Laurent's sudden sob. The young man, pale and trembling, rose from his chair, his hands wringing. "I can't bear it any more," he cried. I took the key. I confess, Monsieur Poirot." Madame Dubois gasped, her hand flying to her throat. "Pierre, mon Dieu, what are you saying?" Poirot's green eyes locked onto Pierre, unblinking. "Continuez, Monsieur Laurent. You took the key to cabin 14. When and why?" Pierre's voice shook. "After the scream, when everyone was in the corridor. I saw the key on Miss Vance's bedside table while the steward was distracted. I took it, slipped it into my pocket. I didn't mean harm. I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" Poirot pressed, his tone calm but relentless. Pierre's eyes darted to Madame Dubois, then away. "I knew Eleanor in Paris more than I admitted. We were close, briefly. She told me about the ring, said it was hidden in her cabin. After she died, I thought, If I took the key, I could find it, protect her secret. Colonel Blake snorted. Protect her secret, or line your pockets, boy. Sir Reginald's voice was sharp. This is nonsense, Poirot. He's admitting to theft, not murder. Poirot raised a hand, silencing them. Attendez. Monsieur Laurent, you claim you took the key to find the ring. Did you enter cabin 14 again? Pierre shook his head vigorously. No, I swear. I panicked and threw the key overboard the next morning. I didn't want to be caught with it. Madame Dubois' face was a mask of fury. Pierre, you fool! Why didn't you tell me? Poirot's gaze shifted to her. Oui, madame, an excellent question. You were unaware of Monsieur Laurent's connection to Miss Vance, yet your reaction suggests deeper feelings. Jealousy, perhaps. Madame Dubois stiffened, her lips tight. I am not jealous of a dead woman, Monsieur Poirot. Miss Wren, her voice soft, spoke up. I saw Monsieur Laurent near cabin 14 that night, after the scream. He was holding something small, shiny. I thought it was a coin, but it could have been the key. Dr. Marsh folded her arms. This proves nothing. Laurent's a thief, not a killer. The real question is who poisoned Carver. Kerr the steward shifted uneasily, his scar stark under the library's light. I told you, sir. I only served Carver's drink. I didn't see no key. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Vraiment, Monsieur Kerr? Yet your cigarettes, they appear at both crime scenes. And you were near the purser's office when the key vanished from the safe. Kerr's eyes widened. I didn't take it. I swear on my life. Poirot turned back to Pierre. Monsieur Laurent, your confession, it is convenient. A lesser crime to shield a greater one, perhaps? Or do you protect another? Pierre's face crumpled. No, I only took the key. I didn't kill her, or Carver. Poirot nodded, his mind racing. Pierre's confession explained the missing key, but not the murders. The scratches on cabin 14's lock, the Turkish cigarettes, the photograph with C.W., they pointed to a deeper conspiracy. Was Pierre a scapegoat, or was his story a clever ruse to divert suspicion? Merci, Monsieur Laurent, Poirot said. You will remain under watch. The rest of you, consider this. The killer is among us, and their mask is slipping. I shall find them. As the group dispersed, Poirot lingered, his grey cells humming. Pierre's confession was a piece of the puzzle, but the picture was incomplete. The ring, the scandal, and the curse of cabin 13 loomed large, and Poirot sensed the final act approaching. Chapter 12. The Final Confrontation. The dining saloon of the SS Azure was a cathedral of elegance, its long table gleaming under the soft glow of chandeliers, but the air was thick with dread. Hercule Poirot stood at the head, his small frame commanding the room. As the suspects, Sir Reginald Hargrove, Madame Vivienne Dubois, Pierre Laurent, Colonel Mortimer Blake, Miss Clara Wren, Dr. Evelyn Marsh, and the steward James Kerr, sat in uneasy silence. Captain Harrow stood by the door, his face grim as the ship sailed toward New York, now only a day away. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice steady and resonant. 2 murders have stained this voyage, Miss Eleanor Vance, stabbed in her locked cabin, and Monsieur Thomas Carver, poisoned in the bar. The curse of cabin 13 has been invoked, but it is no curse that wields a dagger or slips cyanide into a drink. It is a human hand, and tonight, I, Hercule Poirot, shall name that hand. The room stilled, every eye fixed on him. Poirot's green eyes gleamed as he paced, his hands clasped behind his back. Let us begin with the clues. A locked door, a dagger with a pearl handle, a note reading the curse of 13 claims another, a torn photograph of Miss Vance with C.W., a missing sapphire ring, Turkish cigarettes, and a missing key. Each piece tells a story, non? He turned to the group. Miss Vance was killed in cabin 14, her door locked from within. How? The scratches on the lock suggested tampering. The killer used a duplicate key, crafted in advance, to lock the door after the murder, then removed the original key to create the illusion of a locked room mystery. The missing key, which Monsieur Laurent confessed to taking, was a red herring, taken not by him, but by the killer to cover their tracks. Pierre gasped, but Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, monsieur. Your confession was a gallant attempt to protect another, but it was unnecessary." Poirot produced the torn photograph. This image, found in Miss Vance's cabin, shows her with Charles Whitmore, her former fiancé. In 1929, she stole a sapphire ring from his family, using it as leverage, blackmail perhaps, to secure her fortune or silence a scandal. This ring, her insurance, was her downfall. He paused, his gaze sweeping the table. Monsieur Carver knew of this scandal and hinted at the ring's value. His poisoning was no accident. He was silenced to prevent him from revealing the killer's motive. The Turkish cigarettes found at both scenes pointed to Monsieur Kerr, the steward with the scar. "But are you the killer, Monsieur Kerr?" Kerr's face paled, his scar stark. "I didn't do it, sir. I swear." Poirot nodded. "Oui, I believe you. Your cigarettes were planted by another to cast suspicion. The real killer is cunning, weaving a tapestry of misdirection." He turned to Madame Dubois. "Madame, you knew Miss Vance's scandal and reacted with jealousy when Monsieur Laurent admitted his connection to her. But your role is peripheral. A woman scorned, not a murderer." Madame Dubois's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Poirot's gaze shifted to Sir Reginald. "You, Sir Reginald, knew Whitmore and met Miss Vance in London. Your alibi faltered, but your motive is weak, diplomatic pride, not murder." Colonel Blake bristled as Poirot addressed him. "Colonel, your military precision and knowledge of New York's elite made you a suspect, but your anger is too blunt for this subtle crime." Dr. Marsh raised an eyebrow. "And me, Poirot? Am I next?" "Non, Mademoiselle Marsh," Poirot said. "Your rationality is admirable, but you lack a personal stake in Miss Vance's past." He paused, his eyes settling on Miss Clara Wren, who sat quietly, her spectacles glinting. "Mademoiselle Wren, you are the enigma. You saw shadows, heard whispers, and reported the steward with the scar. Your timid demeanour, it is a mask, no? You are not Clara Wren, governess, but Clara Whitmore, sister of Charles Whitmore, whose life was ruined by Eleanor Vance's blackmail." The room gasped. Miss Wren's face drained of colour, her hands trembling. That's absurd," she stammered. Poirot's voice was relentless. "No, it is truth. You boarded this ship to confront Miss Vance, who destroyed your brother with her theft of the sapphire ring. You learned she occupied cabin 14, next to the infamous cabin 13, and saw an opportunity to frame the curse. You crafted a duplicate key in Southampton, using your brother's connections. You entered her cabin, stabbed her with the pearl-handled dagger, a Whitmore heirloom, and locked the door with your key, removing hers to create the puzzle. The note, 'The Curse of 13 claims another,' was your flourish, tying the crime to the ship's legend." He continued, "When Carver began boasting of the ring, you poisoned him with cyanide, stolen from the ship's medical stores, to silence him. The Turkish cigarettes were a clumsy attempt to implicate Kerr, whom you'd seen smoking them." Miss Wren's voice rose, shrill. "You have no proof!" Poirot produced a small velvet pouch from his pocket. "This, mademoiselle, I found hidden in your cabin this morning. A sapphire ring, the Whitmore heirloom. Your motive was revenge, your method meticulous, but your nerves betrayed you. Miss Wren collapsed, sobbing. She ruined him. Charles took his own life because of her. I had to make her pay. Captain Harrow signalled the stewards, who gently restrained her. The suspect sat stunned, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Poirot's voice softened. The curse of Cabin 13 was a myth, exploited by a grieving sister. Justice, it is served, but at what cost? As Miss Wren was led away, Poirot's grey cells rested, the puzzle complete. The ring, the scandal, and the murders had woven a tragic tale, and Cabin 13's shadow was dispelled by the light of truth. Chapter 13. The Resolution. The SS Azure glided into New York Harbor under a sky bruised with dawn's first light, the Statue of Liberty, a silent sentinel welcoming the weary travellers. Hercule Poirot stood on the promenade deck, his overcoat buttoned against the chill, his moustache impeccably waxed despite the early hour. The ship's ordeal, 2 murders a storm, and the unmasking of Clara Wren as the killer, had left its passengers subdued, their chatter replaced by a sombre quiet. In the captain's office, Poirot had just concluded a final meeting with Captain Harrow, who now held the sapphire ring and the pearl-handled dagger as evidence for the authorities. Clara Wren, revealed as Clara Whitmore, was confined to a guarded cabin, awaiting transfer to New York police upon docking. Her confession had unravelled the mystery of Cabin 13, exposing the curse as a fabrication to mask her revenge against Eleanor Vance. Poirot's thoughts were heavy as he gazed at the approaching skyline. Mon Dieu, he murmured, the human heart, it is a labyrinth. Revenge, love, greed, all threads in the tapestry of this tragedy. Captain Harrow joined him, his face lined with relief. You've done it again, Poirot. Solved the unsolvable. The passengers are shaken, but they're safe now, thanks to you. Poirot inclined his head. Merci, Captain. But safety is fleeting when the heart harbours darkness. Mademoiselle Wren, Clara Whitmore, acted out of grief for her brother, yet her justice was a poison, claiming 2 lives. Harrow nodded. What about the others, Laurent, Dubois? The rest, they're cleared. Oui, Poirot said. Monsieur Laurent's theft of the key was a misguided act of loyalty, perhaps to protect Madame Dubois's feelings. Madame Dubois herself was driven by jealousy, not murder. Sir Reginald Hargrove, Colonel Blake and Dr. Marsh had their secrets, but none wielded the dagger or cyanide. The steward, Monsieur Kerr, was a convenient scapegoat, his cigarettes used to mislead. Harrow rubbed his jaw, and that ring, it's caused enough trouble. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The sapphire ring, it was the spark of this tragedy. Stolen by Miss Vance from the Whitmore family, it became her weapon of blackmail, and Clara's motive for vengeance. It will be returned to its rightful owners, I trust. As the ship docked, Poirot observed the passengers disembarking, their faces a mix of relief and lingering unease. Madame Vivienne Dubois, arm in arm with Pierre Laurent, cast a wary glance at Poirot, her pride intact but her trust in her companion shaken. Sir Reginald Hargrove hurried off, muttering about diplomatic reports, while Colonel Blake strode away, eager to leave the SS Azure behind. Dr. Evelyn Marsh paused to nod at Poirot, a gesture of respect for his clarity in chaos. James Kerr, the steward, approached hesitantly. Monsieur Poirot, I thank you for clearing my name. I thought I was done for. Poirot smiled faintly. Mon ami, truth is the only antidote to suspicion. Your cigarettes were a clumsy clue, but Hercule Poirot sees beyond such tricks. As Kerr scurried off, Poirot's gaze fell on cabin 13, visible from the deck. The curse had been a myth, yet its shadow had fueled fear and deception. He reflected on Clara Whitmore, her grief twisted into murder. "Justice is served," he whispered, "but the heart, it weeps for what might have been." With a final tip of his hat to the captain, Poirot descended the gangway, his polished shoes clicking on the dock. New York's bustle awaited, but for now, the mystery of cabin 13 was closed, its secrets laid bare by the little Belgian with the magnificent moustache. "Au revoir, SS Azure," he said softly. "May your next voyage be less eventful."